You've been trying to solve the problem without ever clearly defining it. That sounds impossible. How can someone solve a problem without knowing what the problem is? Yet that's exactly what most people do every day. They fight stress without understanding what's causing it. They chase success without defining what success means. They try to fix relationships without identifying what is actually broken. They work harder, think harder, worry harder, but never stop long enough to ask the most important question: what exactly is the problem? And because they never answer that question, they remain trapped inside confusion. Imagine being lost in a forest. You don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. You don't know which direction leads home. Now imagine running faster. Would that help? Of course not. Speed is useless when direction is missing. Yet that's how most people live. The moment a challenge appears, they immediately start searching for solutions. They collect advice. They watch videos. They read books. They ask friends. They create plans, all before taking the time to clearly understand what they're actually trying to solve. As a result, they spend months fighting symptoms while the real problem remains untouched. And that's why so many people feel exhausted. Not because life is complicated, but because confusion is exhausting. The human mind hates uncertainty. When something feels unclear, your brain keeps revisiting it. It keeps running scenarios. It keeps searching for answers. The problem follows you everywhere. At work, at home, during dinner, before sleep. Even when you're resting, part of your mind remains occupied. Not because the problem is huge, but because it is undefined. A vague problem creates endless anxiety. A clear problem creates a path forward. That's the difference. Think about the last time something was bothering you. Maybe it was your career. You kept telling yourself, "I'm unhappy with my job." But what does that actually mean? Do you hate the work, the people, the salary, the lack of growth, the long hours, the uncertainty? Those are completely different problems, and each one requires a different solution. But as long as everything remains trapped inside one vague sentence, your mind cannot move forward, because you cannot solve what you cannot see. That's why clarity feels so powerful. The moment you define something clearly, it loses some of its power over you. Notice what happens when you finally put a fear into words. Suddenly, it becomes smaller, more manageable, more concrete, What once felt like a giant monster hiding in the dark becomes a challenge standing in the light. And challenges are easier to face than mysteries. Most suffering comes from mental fog. The mind creates stories, assumptions, worst-case scenarios. It combines dozens of different fears into one giant emotional cloud. Then it tells you that cloud is impossible to overcome. But often, the moment you break it apart, you discover something surprising. The problem is far smaller than you imagined. What felt overwhelming was actually several smaller issues tangled together. And tangled things look bigger than they are. Imagine a pair of headphones stuffed into your pocket. At first glance, the knot looks impossible. But once you identify the first twist, then the second, then the third, the entire mess begins to unravel. Life works the same way. Clarity untangles complexity. That's why writing is such a powerful tool. When thoughts remain inside your head, they stay emotional. They move too fast. They overlap. They contradict each other. One moment you're worried about money, the next you're worried about failure, then rejection, then the future, then something that happened 5 years ago. Everything blends together. But the moment you write things down, something changes. Thoughts become visible. Visible things can be examined. Examined things can be improved. And improved things become solvable. Writing forces precision. It forces honesty. It forces you to stop hiding behind vague language. You can no longer say, "My life is a mess." You must explain why. You must identify the specifics. And that's where breakthroughs happen. Because most people are not defeated by problems. They're defeated by unclear thinking. The problem isn't usually as large as it feels. It's simply hidden beneath layers of emotion. And emotions are terrible problem solvers. They're excellent warning signals, but terrible navigators. When emotions take control, everything feels urgent. Everything feels catastrophic. Everything feels impossible. But clarity changes the entire landscape. It separates facts from fears, reality from imagination, what is happening from what might happen. And that separation creates power, because once you know exactly what you're dealing with, your mind can finally focus its energy. No more guessing, no more spiraling, no more fighting invisible enemies. Just one clear challenge, and one clear next step. That's how progress begins. Not with motivation, not with confidence, not with courage, but with clarity. The people who solve difficult problems are not always smarter. Often they're simply better at defining what they're facing. While everyone else is overwhelmed by confusion, they slow down. They observe. They ask questions. They put things into words. And in doing so, they discover something most people never realize. A problem that can be clearly described is no longer a mystery. And the moment a mystery becomes visible, it stops controlling you. So the next time life feels overwhelming, don't rush towards solutions. Don't search for shortcuts. Don't drown yourself in advice. Instead, stop. Take a piece of paper and ask yourself one question. What exactly is the problem? Not the symptoms, not the emotions, not the story, the actual problem. Because the moment you can describe it with complete clarity, you're no longer standing at the beginning of the journey. You're already halfway to the answer.